viewers. Dr. Hafiz, in the break we were discussing this very salient issue that you brought up, your contact with your students in Punjab University, in which you asked once that describe different social classes. Now we do know that in context of Pakistan, there are several social classes. Like in all societies, there's at least three that we can point out, which is in upper class, a middle class, and a lower class. But at the same time, in the Muslim consciousness, at least the Quran speaks about darajat and tabakat. Darja is defined by your knowledge and piety, that's in the eyes of God, and tabaka is the socio-economic step that you belong to here and now. And it's for Muslims like Christians, it's neither a crime to be rich, nor is it a crime to be poor, as long as your wealth comes from right sources. How do you look at this play of social classes? On one hand, you have this Islamic consciousness. On the other hand, like Dr. Tariq pointed out, there is this vicious capitalist system which is somehow driving classes to a war.
Well, first, before I comment on Pakistani situation or context, let me state that since the onset of industrial revolution in Europe, materialism and the wave around materialism, it emerged throughout the world. Particularly after Second World War, materialism became the buzzword all around the world, and it created three socio-economic classes: low, middle, and high. Now these socio-economic classes, low, middle, and high, they virtually have either disappeared or disappearing now, or will disappear.
And how so?
And now I come back to Pakistani context. I happened to be in the class when I received a call to participate in this session or in this program. And I, out of my natural circumstances at that time, I asked students, what are the felt classes around you, which you feel that these are distinct groups around you? And they came up with several ideas as classes which they have experienced or
what they perceived as classes.
What they are perceiving as classes. One boy, he said that there are sinful people, there are pious people, there are rich people, and there are poor people. And I myself don't know where do I belong. I probably do not belong to any one of those four classes which he mentioned. Then I asked other students. One student said that there are now temporary groups which become consciously prevalent around you. They just come and go. And one group they mentioned was Mummy Daddy group. They said it is weird sort of group of people who do not really believe in the existing dominant norms, values and beliefs of the society.
This is the westernized class.
This is westernized, modern, overly modern class, and they are, in a way, they believe in xenocentrism. They like foreign cultures, they don't like their own culture. So this is one response of students. Another student said, there are two classes. One is snatchers, the other are victims. Another person said, there are people who are very selfish, and there are people who promote collective interest. Another person said, there are good people, there are evil people. One girl said, there are divorcees, they are married.
So there is a lot of there's a lot of duality.
This is a lot of duality, and you said it right. And there are different dimensions which people are experiencing through their consciousness.
It's very interesting because dualism is really the first step of analysis. That you try to distinguish from one unified whole into at least two parts, and then of course we become more nuanced and we become into production theory. But the interesting thing is that And this is my question to you, Dr. Tar. This is very interesting response that Dr. Hafiz produced by, which is, from a young mind, he's trying to perceive that what is the social stratification, and they're trying to conceive of so many different ways of looking at it. But back in 60s and 70s, we used to go to Murray, which is a very beautiful hill station. Then something happened around the 80s that all of the people, the quote-unquote we call the gentry, stopped going to Murray. Why did they stop going to Murray? Because there was this assault by the middle class. Due to increased means of transportation and communication, you found that there were many people from the lower social classes. Not that anything is wrong with these people in the lower social classes, but many things I've seen myself were perhaps not so pleasant. And so how do you look at this phenomenon in Pakistan, that eventually, if we want to have a progressive state, there is going to be a large middle class? There should be a large middle class if you are going to go the European route or the American route and so forth. There will be a small rich class, and there will be then preferably a small underclass, a service class. How do you keep this new middle class that we talked about, the Murray phenomenon? How do you either bring them in conformity with the taste of the upper classes, or you try to bridge the gap between the upper and the lower by bringing the upper classes to give them a reality check? What's your suggestion? How should Pakistan go about doing that?
Interesting proposition that you're playing with.
Yeah.
I would say class structure in Pakistani society is developing, it's unfolding, it's extending. But that does not mean that the distinction between high and low has evaporated. Pakistan, if you look at Pakistan, Pakistan is a very unique society in a sense that it was a country which as a society that existed for hundreds of years.
Right.
But as a nation state, it came to be only 50 years ago. Now the trouble is that with the creation of Pakistan, if you remember Hanzalvi's famous thesis of salaried classes,
that's right,
salariat joined. They were the ones who were pushing this movement for Pakistan, and that did materialize into increased social mobility across the classes. When we all have heard stories how people stories of rag to riches. Soon after partition, people came empty-handed, and within a generation, they were the movers of the shakers of the country. So at one level, there is a great degree of inter-class mobility in Pakistan. But at the other end, so you see these new emerging middle classes who are start frequently visiting those places,
right,
which were the preserve of the elite, because as we all know, Murray as a hill station was developed by British, and in the beginning it was only the British colonial elite and not even natives, Indian, even gentry was allowed at the Murray Hill Station. It is only when they left that the native gentry took over, and then they started monopolizing that sort of place. So at one end we do see a lot of social mobility, new classes emerging. Think about this trading class that has emerged and actually shaped Pakistani national politics. Nawaz Sharif, the group that he belongs to, his supporters are not big industrialists.
This was what we would call the proto-bourgeoisie.
The proto-bourgeoisie and the small traders. They are all sprung up in all small towns and cities, and they're conservative. They probably will not side with PPP, but they will side with right-wing parties like PMLN and Q. So there, at one end, there is a class mobility and lots going on. But the other end, if you look at the access to resources,
right,
there is no land reforms here, so all of Sindh and all of Balochistan and all of Fatan, whatnot, is actually controlled by very few families. So the feudal control that the British has created is still deeply entrenched. And then there are industrial class is very weak in this country, because predominantly agricultural feudal classes have held the state hostage. As a result of that, what could have been achieved through Pakistan has not really come through because of this colonial control, these classes that were created during the colonial period. And these new classes are struggling to come out of those shackles.
Right.
I'd like to comment on this Murray phenomenon.
Yeah, I would like to actually ask you this. There's a very significant point that you mentioned. I want to take your response on this question, but just